Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are jumping into one of the most debated, and let's be honest, one of the most difficult chapters in the entire New Testament.
We're tackling Galatians chapter 3. A lot of scholars basically call this one of the Apostle Paul's most tangled arguments. It's famously a real head-scratcher, but don't worry, we're going to untangle it piece by piece.
So here's our game plan. First, we've got to get the fiery context of this letter. Then we'll demystify that whole curse of the law thing. We're going to bust a major myth about faith versus works. And then we'll get clear on what the law's actual job was. And finally, we'll see how it all explodes into Paul's incredible vision for a brand new kind of human family.
Okay, first things first, and this is absolutely crucial. This is not some calm, cool, and collected theology lecture. Galatians is a letter written in the white-hot heat of a crisis. And understanding that conflict, well, that's the key to unlocking everything else.
So what was the crisis all about? It was about a group of other Christian missionaries who came into town right after Paul left, and they had a very different message. They were telling all the non-Jewish believers, the Gentiles, that they had to Judaize. That means they had to get circumcised and follow all the Jewish ethnic rules to really be part of God's family.
I mean, these two messages could not be more different. They were completely incompatible. You had the missionaries preaching a gospel of ethnic conformity, and Paul preaching a gospel of multi-ethnic unity in Christ. For Paul, this wasn't just, a different opinion. No way. This was a betrayal of the very heart of the gospel.
And this fire is what leads to Paul's first big counterattack. It involves this infamous and so often misunderstood phrase, the curse of the law.
Now, a really common way to read this is to say, yep, the law demands perfection, nobody's perfect, so everyone who even tries to follow it is cursed. It seems pretty straightforward, right? But that reading totally misses the laser-focused, tactical nature of what Paul is actually doing here.
See, if you look closer at the context, you realize Paul isn't making some grand universal statement for all people for all time. He's being strategic. He's aiming this argument right at the missionaries, and he's about to turn their own logic completely against them.
Paul's point is that his opponent's whole position just doesn't make sense. He's essentially saying, okay guys, let's think this through. You believe in Christ, who has created this new, multi-ethnic family, but you're also preaching that everyone has to follow the old, ethnically defined law. You can't have it both ways. In fact, by your own logic, if the law is the absolute standard, then you're the ones inviting its curse by trying to mix these things.
Now, that leads us right into the second huge myth we have to bust, and that's the idea that Galatians is just a simple showdown between faith, meaning just believing stuff in your head, and works, which means doing anything for God.
Our source, Dr. Tim Gombis, uses this just brilliant modern analogy that shows how what we say depends entirely on who we're talking to and why. It's a story about a dad who loves sports and his two very different sons.
So the older son, he's not into baseball like his dad. He's a skater. And one night, he asks his dad this deeply personal question. He's not just asking for information, right? He's asking for acceptance. He's asking, are you okay with me?
To reassure his son, the father might say something like, "Son, I don't care about baseball at all. What I care about is you." Now, this is fascinating because this dad loves baseball. He coaches his younger son's team. But in this moment, for this relationship, that isn't the most important truth.
What this shows us is that the father's statement, "I don't care about baseball," isn't some abstract universal fact about the sport. It's a specific relational truth meant to affirm his son. It was true in that context.
And that is exactly what Paul is doing. When he tells the non-Jewish Galatians that the law is not from faith, he is not trashing the entire law for all time. He's saying, for you, in your situation, the faithful path is not to start adopting all these Jewish identity markers. That's not what God is asking of you. It's specific pastoral instruction, not some universal decree.
So you can see the next logical question coming, right? If adopting the law isn't the goal for these Gentile believers, then what was the point of the law in the first place? What was its job?
Paul's strategy here is so clever. He zooms out and puts a ton of historical distance between God's original promise to Abraham and the law. He points out, hey, the promise came first, by a long shot. The law of Moses didn't show up for another 430 years, so it couldn't have replaced the promise. It must have had a different and temporary role to play.
And Paul describes that job using the Greek word pedagogos, which we often translate as a tutor or a guardian. Its purpose wasn't to give ultimate life, but to act as a placeholder. Its job was to keep the nation of Israel distinct, to hold them together through history, until the promised seed, who is Christ, finally arrived.
And all this dense argument and historical timeline, it's all building to Paul's grand finale. After he dismantles his opponent's arguments, he finally reveals the stunning, beautiful vision that their teaching was totally obscuring. This is the whole point.
You see, the promise to Abraham was never about making all the nations ethnically Jewish. It was about creating one new, unified, multi-ethnic family. And in this new family, founded in Christ, the deepest social, ethnic, and gender divisions of the ancient world are just declared irrelevant. Jew and Greek, slave and free, male and female, all of you are made one.
So this leaves us with a pretty provocative thought. Paul's vision was a radical undoing of the divisions that defined his world. And understanding this ancient letter isn't just about solving a theological puzzle. It confronts us with a question for our own time. If these divisions were declared irrelevant 2,000 years ago, why do they still hold such a powerful grip on us today?